You are not getting ahead, not because you are lazy, not because you lack ambition or talent or the willingness to work. You are not getting ahead because you are playing a game designed to keep you exactly where you are. And nobody in the game has any structural incentive to tell you that. The people above you reach their positions through a set of rules that no longer apply with the same reliability. The institutions that trained you optimized for your functionality inside a system, not for your ascent above it. And the advice you have received, work harder, specialize more, build your network, earn the credential, has produced exactly the results that advice was always going to produce. Incremental progress inside someone else's structure, not escape from it. You are competing. Right now, today, whether or not you have named it, you are competing. You are competing with everyone who holds the same title, the same certifications, the same measurable output metrics your employer uses to evaluate performance. You are competing with people who are willing to do what you do for less compensation, in fewer hours, with fewer complaints. You are competing with systems that are being designed at this moment to approximate your function automatically. And here's the part that the motivational literature does not address directly. The harder you compete on the dimensions where competition is possible, the more you confirm that you are replaceable. Because competing confirms that others are competing too. And the only real escape from competition is to a coupé, a position where competition becomes structurally irrational. Machiavelli understood this before the concept had a name. He observed it in the city-states of northern Italy, in the courts he served, in the rulers who lasted, and the rulers who did not. The ones who survived were not always the most aggressive or the most talented. They were the ones who had constructed positions so defensible, so costly to attack, that their rivals redirected their energy elsewhere. The lesson he drew from this was not primarily about warfare. It was about the geometry of power. Force is expensive, temporary, and exhausting. Position, correctly established, is self-sustaining, and the person in the right position does not need to outcompete anyone. They simply need to remain where they are. This is the distinction nobody teaches you. Not in school, not in professional development seminars, not in the career advice columns that tell you to build your personal brand and optimize your LinkedIn profile. The distinction between competing and positioning. Competing means entering a race that others have also entered, performing better than them along dimensions that have been defined in advance, and hoping the gap between your performance and theirs is wide enough to matter. Positioning means identifying terrain that only your specific trajectory has equipped you to occupy and building something there that nobody else can build, because nobody else has stood where you have stood. Consider what you were told to build. The narrative given to most people entering professional life is organized around 5 categories of advantage: skills, knowledge, network, capital, credentials. You were told that building these things would create durable differentiation, that investing in them was the rational path toward financial security and professional advancement, and the system genuinely rewards building them. The credential gets you the interview, the skill gets you the offer, the network gets you the referral. None of this is false. The problem is not that these things have no value. The problem is that every one of them can be replicated by anyone with sufficient motivation and enough time. Consider skills. The argument for skill development rests on the assumption that competence is rare enough to command a premium. A decade ago, this was partially defensible. The time required to develop genuine technical expertise created a natural barrier that protected those who had already cleared it. That barrier has been systematically demolished. AI-assisted learning, structured online education, open-source tools available to anyone with an internet connection, and the radical compression of feedback loops have reduced the timeline to professional competence in most domains from years to months. The skill you spent 3 years developing is available as a structured curriculum to anyone willing to invest 3 months and the cost of a subscription. This is not an argument against Arnie's skills. It is an argument against treating skill as your primary moat. Consider knowledge. The democratization of information has been so complete and so rapid that it no longer registers as a transformation. It has simply become the default condition of the world. Everything is findable. Every domain has been documented, explained, indexed, and made searchable. Knowing something is not an advantage when access to that knowledge requires only a query and 30 seconds. The advantage has migrated entirely away from possession of information and toward application of information inside specific contexts, under specific constraints, with specific people who have specific reasons to trust the person applying it. Context is not something that can be searched, but raw knowledge, the kind school measured and rewarded, is effectively free now. Consider network. The conventional wisdom treats network as a durable asset, and there is something to this, but a network is more copyable than it appears. Anyone with genuine patience, a clear value proposition, and consistent follow-through can build meaningful professional relationships over time. The geographic, informational, and social barriers that once made network development a function of birth and proximity have been systematically lowered by digital platforms. The person building a professional network today has structural access to the same people as anyone else willing to do the work. A broad network is valuable, but a broad network is not uncopyable. And uncopyable is the only category of advantage that solves the problem permanently. Consider credentials. A credential is, by definition, a replicable asset. That is the entire premise of the certification system. It confirms that a person has met a standard, and any person who meets the same standard achieves the same confirmation. Credentials differentiate within a cohort. They do not remove you from the cohort. They mark you as having cleared a threshold that others can also clear. They are the price of admission, not the source of lasting advantage. And the more valuable a credential becomes, the more people pursue it, until the credential itself inflates to the point where it no longer differentiates at all. This is not a flaw in any particular credential. It is the mechanical outcome of any replicable standard operating inside a competitive market. And here is the part nobody says directly. The system does not tell you that everything it rewards can be replicated by anyone with sufficient motivation. It teaches skills, knowledge, network, capital, and credentials as the architecture of professional success, because building those things makes you more valuable inside the system, not above it. A more skilled employee is a more useful employee. A more credentialed employee is more legible to institutional evaluators. The system's incentive is your continued productive participation in it, not your escape from it. Machiavelli would have recognized this immediately. Every system of power, he observed, teaches the next generation exactly what the current generation needs them to know, not what they would need to know to redesign the system from the outside. So what cannot be copied? The answer is not a thing. It is a position. Specifically, the position produced by the unrepeatable intersection of three elements that only your particular life trajectory could have generated, in your particular order, at your particular moment in the histories of the industries and communities you passed through. This position is not abstract. It is the specific vantage point from which you can see things that people standing anywhere else cannot see. It is the foundation of what genuine competitive irrelevance is actually built from. The first element is your lived experience stack. Not experience in the general sense, years accumulated, industries touched, job titles held. The lived experience stack is the specific combination of contexts, problems, environments, transitions, and failures that your particular path has assembled in a particular sequence. This combination is not merely statistically rare, it is structurally unrepeatable. To replicate your experience stack, someone would need to live your life in your order, to have been present in your specific organizations at the specific moments you were present, to have failed in the specific ways you failed, and to have moved through the specific transitions you moved through at the exact moments those industries and institutions were at those stages of their own evolution. Consider a person who spent 4 years working inside a government regulatory agency, then 3 years at a venture-backed startup in the same sector, then 2 years advising the established incumbents those startups were disrupting. That person can see the regulatory logic that frustrates entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurial pace that terrifies regulators, and the institutional inertia that makes both groups ineffective from the inside of all three simultaneously. That simultaneous visibility is not a skill. No course teaches it. No credential certifies it. It is a position. And it was created not by intention, but by the unrepeatable sequence of that specific path through those specific environments at those specific moments. Nobody can manufacture that. They can only accumulate their own. The second element is contextual trust capital. There is a categorical difference between being known and being trusted in a specific context by a specific community for specific reasons grounded in direct, accumulated experience. General reputation is copyable. Broad credibility can be built by anyone willing to invest time and produce visible results. But contextual trust capital, the kind of trust that forms inside a particular professional community over years of demonstrated reliability, is not transferable and cannot be shortcut. A newcomer to any established field discovers this immediately. The trust that insiders extend to one another, built through shared experience and consistent behavior over years, is not available to the newcomer regardless of their external credentials or published work. It must be earned the same way everyone who has it earned it. Through time, through presence when it mattered, through delivering when delivery was difficult, through being in the room repeatedly until being in the room became unremarkable. There is no faster path to this, and that is precisely what makes it uncopyable. Its production cannot be accelerated without destroying the specific thing that gives it value. Trust formed quickly is trusted less. Trust accumulated slowly, through repeated demonstration across varied circumstances, becomes something qualitatively different from reputation. It becomes the default assumption a community makes about a person before that person has said anything. That assumption is an asset. It generates access, opportunity, and return in ways that are entirely invisible to anyone who does not hold it. The third element is perspective arbitrage. From the vantage point created by your specific experience stack and your specific contextual trust, you can see things that people without that vantage point cannot see. Not because you are more intelligent, not because you have worked harder or read more or optimized your thinking more deliberately, because you are standing in a place that makes certain connections, contradictions, and opportunities visible that are invisible from every other location. This is perspective arbitrage, the ability to see value that others cannot access because they do not occupy your position. It produces insight that seems obvious to you and appears extraordinary to everyone else. You have felt this. The meeting where you could see immediately why a proposed solution would fail, and explaining it took 20 minutes, because nobody else in the room had the contextual foundation to follow the logic quickly. The conversation where you identified an opportunity that seemed invisible to the other people present, not because they were less capable, but because they had not stood where you had stood, and looked at the problem from inside the same combination of experiences. That friction, the experience of knowing something clearly that others cannot see at all, is not a communication failure. It is perspective arbitrage in operation. It is the direct phenomenological experience of occupying a position nobody else occupies. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who holds the high ground holds the battle, not because he attacks more effectively, but because attacking him costs more than the potential gain justifies. Proprietary positioning is the high ground of professional competition. It does not need to defeat competitors along conventional dimensions. It needs only to make competition prohibitively expensive to attempt, because the competitor cannot replicate the position without replicating the life, and replicating the life is not possible. The person with genuine proprietary positioning does not need to outwork, outlearn, or outperform anyone. They simply need to remain in the position, which becomes more defensible the longer they hold it. And here is what this means practically. You are not behind because you have not worked hard enough. You are not behind because you made the wrong choices about which skills to develop or which credentials to pursue. You are behind because you have been building in the wrong category. You have been building assets that can be replicated while the unrepeatable assets you already possess have gone unrecognized and undeveloped. The experience you dismiss as background noise is the lived experience stack nobody can copy. The community that trusts you in ways that feel ordinary from inside your own life represents contextual trust, capital that would take years for anyone else to accumulate. The things you can see clearly that others cannot see at all are the raw material of perspective arbitrage. The question that changes everything is not what skills you should develop next. It is this: what can you see from where you have been that nobody standing anywhere else can see? Who trusted you in a context specific enough that the trust itself is the asset, not merely what you did to earn it? What is the position that your unrepeatable sequence of experiences and transitions has placed you in? And what can only be built from that position? These are not rhetorical questions. They are diagnostic tools. The answers locate the terrain that only your specific trajectory has equipped you to occupy. Most people never ask these questions, not because they are incapable of answering them, but because the system they were trained inside had no use for the answers. The system needed you to develop skills it could deploy, credentials it could verify, and a work ethic calibrated to its own timelines. It had no incentive to help you identify the position that would make your participation in the system optional. That omission was not malicious, it was structural. Systems optimize for their own continuation, and a person who has identified and built from their proprietary position is a person who is, at minimum, negotiating from a different category of leverage than someone who has not. This is not pessimism about employment, institutions, or the conventional path. Some people build genuinely uncopyable positions inside organizations over careers long enough that the contextual trust capital they have accumulated becomes the primary source of their professional value, independent of any specific skill or credential. The point is not that the conventional path is wrong. The point is that the conventional path, followed without understanding its structural logic, produces people who compete indefinitely without ever reaching the category of advantage that makes competition irrelevant. And competing indefinitely is exhausting in a way that building a genuine position is not. Machiavelli observed that the city-states that lasted were not the ones with the largest armies or the most aggressive expansion strategies. They were the ones that had identified terrains so naturally defensible that the cost of displacing them never justified the attempt. Venice survived not because it was the most powerful state in northern Italy, but because its position inside the lagoon made conquest geometrically irrational. The army that could defeat Venice in open battle had no mechanism to force Venice to come out and fight in open battle. The position was the advantage, not the capability. The position. You have a position. It was built by every transition you have made, every context you have inhabited, every failure that reoriented your path, every community that extended trust to you specifically, because you had been present long enough to earn it. It was built without your deliberate intention, which is why it has gone unrecognized. The 5 signs that you have already built more of this position than you realize are these. You find yourself explaining things to credentialed experts that they have never considered from your angle. People in specific communities refer others to you, not for your credentials, but because they know specifically how you think. You see failure modes in proposals that others cannot see until after the failure occurs. You have been in rooms that others are trying to get access to, not because of what you know, but because of who you are in relation to that room. And when you describe your own perspective, people with more formal training tell you that it reframes something they had never questioned.